Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the shadowy corridors of a vast Victorian manor house, where gas lamps flicker against polished wood panelling and every creak of the floorboards echoes through 67 rooms. You're about to follow the head housekeeper on her nightly rounds, a ritual so precise, so methodical, that it takes nearly 2 full hours to complete. The story may solve mysteries you never had an explanation for, like why these enormous houses employed armies of servants, or how families slept soundly knowing strangers roamed their halls after dark. So, before you explore the story with me, please take a moment to help me subscribe to the channel, like and share this video, or maybe leave a comment below, but make sure you do it when you really like what I bring to you. Tell me where you're watching from tonight, or share your favourite historical detail you've learned from this channel. Maybe you're tucked in bed in Toronto, or perhaps you're listening during a late shift in Sydney. I'd love to know. Now, let's keep the lights as soft as possible. Turn on the fan for a gentle sound to help the story feel more emotional, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. You stand in the entrance hall as November twilight bleeds through the stained glass fanlight above the main door. The year is 1887 and you are Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood, head housekeeper of Thornfield Manor, a sprawling estate in the Cotswolds that spans 42,000 square feet. Your black bombazine dress rustles as you adjust the chatelaine at your waist, that distinctive badge of office that marks you as the keeper of the household's secrets. Hanging from its silver chains are the tools of your trade: scissors, a notepad, a pencil, a thimble, and most importantly, the master key ring. The weight of that ring never fails to remind you of your responsibility. 47 keys in total, each one cut from brass or iron, each one labelled in your own meticulous handwriting on tiny vellum tags. Some open simple bedroom doors, others unlock strong rooms containing the family's silver plate worth thousands of pounds. A few keys fit locks so old that the mechanisms date back to the house's construction in 1672, when the first Earl of Thornfield built this monument to his wool-trading fortune. You glance at the long case clock in the corner, 6:45 in the evening. Dinner service upstairs has just begun, which means you have exactly 2 hours before the family retires. 2 hours to secure every entrance, every window latch, every cupboard containing anything of value. 2 hours to transform this bustling hive of activity into a fortress against the night. The gas lamps along the corridor hiss softly as you begin your rounds, their mantles glowing with that peculiar greenish-white light that never quite feels natural. You've been doing this for 14 years, ever since you were promoted from under housekeeper at age 32, and your route never varies. Consistency is everything in a house like this. Deviation breeds chaos, and chaos breeds disaster. You start walking toward the servants' wing, your footsteps muffled by the long runner carpet that stretches down the corridor. Behind you, you can hear the distant clatter of dishes from the scullery, where 3 kitchen maids are already washing the pots from tonight's elaborate dinner. Roast duck with orange sauce, if you remember correctly. Cook had been in a foul mood all afternoon about the quality of the oranges delivered by the greengrocer. The servants' wing occupies the entire eastern section of the ground floor, a maze of narrow passages, tiny bedrooms, and workrooms that house the 23 staff members who keep this estate functioning. Most people who visit grand houses never see these areas. They admire the marble fireplaces and crystal chandeliers in the staterooms, never imagining the warren of utilitarian spaces hidden behind green baize doors. Your first stop is always the scullery entrance, a sturdy oak door that opens onto the kitchen yard. You test the handle twice, feeling the satisfying resistance of the bolt you watched the scullery maid throw just 10 minutes ago. Still, you pull your key ring forward and locate the appropriate key by touch alone. The metal is slightly warmer than the others because this lock gets used dozens of times each day. You insert it, turn it, hear the second bolt slide home with a solid chunk, then withdraw the key and test the handle again. Locked, recorded mentally, move on. Historians still argue whether the Victorians' obsession with locking everything stemmed from genuine security concerns or from a deeper anxiety about social class boundaries. After all, what good is a physical barrier between the family's quarters and the servants' wing if both groups share the same roof every night? Perhaps the locks were less about keeping thieves out and more about maintaining the illusion of separation, a tangible reminder that despite the intimacy of shared domestic space, certain boundaries must never be crossed. You continue down the passage to the coal cellar door. This one requires a different key entirely, a long iron skeleton key that looks like something from a Gothic novel. The coal cellar extends deep beneath the house, its vaulted brick ceiling supported by pillars that date back to the original construction. Down there in the darkness, 20 tons of anthracite coal sit waiting to feed the house's 16 fireplaces and 4 cooking ranges through the winter months. Is worth a small fortune, and more than one dishonest coal merchant has tried to bribe his way into under-delivering. The lock on this door is particularly stubborn. You have to jiggle the key slightly while turning, compensating for 2 centuries of wear on the mechanism. There it catches, and the bolt slides across. You make a mental note to have the estate carpenter look at it next week. A broken lock on the coal cellar would be more than an inconvenience. It would be a security breach that could cost you your position. As you lock the wine cellar access door 3 turns, this one, because the lock has a triple tumbler mechanism installed after a footman was caught stealing port in 1881, you remember a quirky detail you once read in the Housekeeper's journal from the 1790s. Back then, the head housekeeper actually slept in a small bedroom adjacent to the wine cellar, presumably to personally guard against theft. You sometimes wonder if she slept well, knowing that hundreds of bottles of expensive claret rested just beyond her wall, or if she lay awake listening for the scrape of a pick in the lock. The servants' hall is empty now, its long table cleared of the simple supper the staff ate an hour ago. Cold meat, bread, cheese, and small beer, nothing fancy, but filling enough after a long day's work. You check the window latches here, 8 in total, running your fingers along each one to ensure they're properly seated. One is slightly loose, and you tighten it with the small wrench you keep on your chatelaine for exactly this purpose. You smile to yourself, remembering the new underfootman's face last week when he saw you tightening a screw. He'd look positively scandalized that a woman would perform such a task. Youth these days have no idea how much practical knowledge a housekeeper must possess. You can replaster a wall, rewire a bell pull, calculate household accounts to the penny, negotiate with tradesmen, diagnose illness in staff members, and yes, repair basic hardware. The keys are just the visible symbol of your authority. The real power lies in knowing every inch of this house better than anyone else alive. You lift the master keyring from your chatelaine and hold it up to the gaslight, examining the collection of brass and iron that represents your authority over Thornfield Manor. 47 keys, each one as familiar to your fingertips as your own signature. The ring itself is a heavy circle of steel, worn smooth by decades of handling. You inherited it from Mrs. Pemberton, the previous head housekeeper, who inherited it from her predecessor, stretching back through an unbroken line of women who've guarded this house since the early 1700s. The weight surprises visitors when you occasionally let them hold it, nearly 3 pounds of metal that hangs from your waist for 12 to 14 hours every day. Your left hip bears a permanent indentation from where the chatelaine rests, a mark of office as distinctive as any military medal. On particularly long days, you can feel the strain in your lower back, but you'd never dream of complaining. This weight is your pride, your proof of trustworthiness in a world where a housekeeper's reputation is her only real currency. Each key tells a story if you know how to read it. The largest one, nearly 6 inches long with an ornate bow decorated with the Thornfield family crest, opens the main strong room where the family silver is stored. You run your thumb over the worn pattern of stag rampant above 3 oak leaves, and remember the day Lord Thornfield personally handed you this key 14 years ago. Mrs. Blackwood, he'd said, I'm entrusting you with treasures that have belonged to my family for 2 centuries. Guard them as if they were your own. You've never forgotten the gravity in his voice, or the responsibility that settled onto your shoulders like a mantle. The smallest key, barely larger than a button, fits the lock on Lady Thornfield's jewellery casket in her dressing room. It's made of gold, actual gold, which seems absurdly extravagant for a key, but the late Earl had it commissioned in 1823 to match the casket's golden hinges. You polish this one separately from the others, using a chamois cloth and the finest jeweller's rouge. Because tarnish on a gold key would be a personal embarrassment. Historians still argue whether the elaborate key systems in grand houses were truly necessary, or simply a form of theatre, a way for families to display their wealth by showing how much they had that needed protecting. After all, determined thieves could simply break windows or force doors. But you know the truth that those academic debates miss the keys aren't really about keeping criminals out. They're about knowing exactly who has access to what, about creating a chain of accountability that runs through every level of the household hierarchy. You've organised the keys by wing and frequency of use, a system you developed yourself after studying Mrs. Beeton's famous Book of Household Management. The first cluster contains the keys you'll need in the servants' wing scullery. Larder, linen closet, servants' hall cupboards, these get the most wear, and you replace them every 5 years at the state locksmith's workshop in the village. The brass develops hairline cracks from the constant turning, and you'd rather replace a key than deal with one snapping off in a lock at midnight. The second cluster holds the family wing keys drawing rooms, morning room, music room, conservatory. These are fancier, with decorative bows and longer shanks, because the locks themselves are more sophisticated. Victorian lockmaking had become an art form by the 1880s, with patent mechanisms that could defeat even skilled lockpicks. Lord Thornfield once showed you a newspaper article about the Great Lock Controversy of 1851, when an American locksmith picked the supposedly unpickable Bramer lock at the Crystal Palace exhibition. The whole country had been scandalised, and lock manufacturers had scrambled to develop even more complex mechanisms. You have a private joke about the third cluster, the trouble keys. You call them. These open the rooms that always seem to cause problems, the still room where preserves are made and medicines compounded, the china closet where 200 years of accumulated porcelain crowds the shelves, the game larder where pheasants and venison hang until they're properly aged. Each of these rooms requires special attention because each contains something that could spoil, break, or otherwise create a crisis if not properly monitored. One key stands apart from all the others, hanging on a separate small ring that you keep tucked inside your bodice on a black ribbon. This is the master's study key, and you only retrieve it once per night, during the final rounds. Lord Thornfield insists on this particular security measure because his study contains not just personal correspondence, but also estate documents, land deeds, and financial records that represent the family's entire fortune. The key itself is sealed with red wax each morning after he leaves for the day. and you must break the seal each night to lock the room, then apply a new seal from the stick of wax you keep in your office. You notice one of the keys has developed a slight bend in its shaft, the one for the linen press on the second floor. This happens occasionally when an inexperienced housemaid forces a sticky lock instead of calling for you. You'll need to visit the locksmith tomorrow to have it straightened before it becomes a permanent deformity. A bent key can damage a lock's internal mechanism, and replacing those ornate Victorian locks costs more than most servants earn in a year. The vellum tags attached to each key represent hours of careful work. You wrote them yourself in India ink, using your best copperplate handwriting, then sealed each one with a tiny drop of varnish to protect against moisture and wear. Reading them requires holding the ring close to the light scullery back. Wine cellar triple, blue bedroom second floor, silver pantry main. Each tag is specific enough to identify the lock, but vague enough that a thief who somehow stole your keys wouldn't immediately know what treasures each one protected. There's a quirky superstition among housekeepers that you learned from old misses. Pemberton never set your keyring down without placing it on a white cloth. Something about the keys absorbing negative energy from wood or stone surfaces. Though you suspect the real reason is more practical, a white cloth makes the dark keys impossible to forget or overlook. Still, you honour the tradition, keeping a square of bleached linen in your office specifically for this purpose. Your second key ring, the one most people don't know about, hangs inside your wardrobe in your private sitting room. These are the duplicate keys, carefully labelled and arranged in the same order as your primary set. If you ever lost the main ring, the household would continue functioning without missing a beat. But you've never needed them in 14 years, and you pray you never will. Losing your keys would be more than a professional embarrassment. It would be a fundamental betrayal of the trust that defines your entire position. You remember the story of a housekeeper at Chatsworth who lost her keys during a house party in 1872. She was dismissed within 24 hours, despite 30 years of faithful service, and her name became a cautionary tale whispered among housekeepers across England. Don't pull a Chatsworth, they'd say when someone got careless. The keys aren't just tools, they're symbols of an unbreakable bond between servant and employer. A physical manifestation of trust that can never be restored once broken. As you begin walking toward the grand staircase, the keys chime softly against each other with each step, creating a distinctive musical sound that everyone in the household recognizes. The junior maids straighten up when they hear it approaching. Footmen pause in their duties to nod respectfully. Even the family's children know that the sound of Mrs. Blackwood's keys means someone important is coming, someone who sees everything and forgets nothing. You push through the green baize door that separates the servants' territory from the family's domain, and immediately the world changes. Behind you plain whitewashed walls, practical linoleum floors, the lingering smell of carbolic soap and boiled cabbage. Ahead of you the servants' wing proper, where even the staff quarters maintain a certain dignity befitting a house of Thornfield's standing. This is where your nightly ritual truly begins, in the maze of small bedrooms and workrooms where 23 people sleep under the same roof as their employers. The servants' corridor stretches before you, lit by gas lamps spaced every 12 feet. The wallpaper here is a serviceable brown pattern, nothing fancy, but worlds better than the bare plaster in the scullery passages. Your footsteps echo differently here. The floorboards are older, original to the house's construction, and they creak in a familiar pattern that you've memorized over the years. Third board from the baize door silent, fifth board loud squeak, seventh board gentle groan. You could navigate this corridor blindfolded simply by listening to the floor's complaints. your first stop is the housemaid's sitting room, a modest space where the 6 housemaids take their brief afternoon tea break and spend their rare free hours mending their uniforms. The room is empty now, they're all still working, finishing the evening turn-down service in the family bedrooms upstairs. You check the window first, a tall sash window that overlooks the kitchen courtyard. The catch is secure, but you test it anyway, applying firm pressure to ensure the frame hasn't warped. Old houses shift and settle, and a window that locked perfectly in July might develop a gap come November. The cupboard in the corner requires one of your smaller keys. Inside, you find exactly what you expect: 16 neatly folded aprons, stacks of cleaning rags organised by use, 3 dustpans, and the housemaid's communal supply of button thread and needles. You're not looking for anything specific, but the act of opening and checking is part of the ritual. A good housekeeper knows the contents of every cupboard in her domain, can spot immediately if something is missing or if unauthorised items have appeared. You lock the cupboard and move to the scullery maid's bedroom next door. 3 iron bedsteads, 3 thin mattresses, 3 wooden trunks for personal belongings. The room is barely 10 feet square, and it houses 3 young women who work 16-hour days scrubbing pots and hauling water. The window here is smaller, set high in the wall, and secured with a simple latch that you check with practiced efficiency. One of the beds has a book tucked under the pillow. You catch a glimpse of the title, something romantic and probably inappropriate, but you pretend not to notice. Scullery maids have few enough pleasures in their hard lives. Historians still argue whether the Victorian servant hierarchy was unnecessarily cruel or simply a reflection of broader social realities. The gap between your comfortable housekeeper's sitting room with its fireplace and upholstered chair, and this cramped scullery maid's quarters with its single candle for 3 girls, seems vast even to you. But this is the world you inhabit, and questioning its fundamental structure would be like questioning gravity or the succession of seasons. The boot room sits at the end of the corridor, and you unlock it with a key worn smooth from constant use. The smell hits you immediately: leather polish, blacking compound, and the faint mustiness of damp wool. Rows of boots and shoes line the walls, the family's outdoor footwear: riding boots, Wellington boots, evening slippers, walking shoes. The boot boy, young Timothy, has done his work well tonight. Each pair gleams with fresh polish, laces neatly tied. You make a mental note to compliment him tomorrow. Positive reinforcement works wonders with the younger staff. But it's not the boots you're checking. You cross to the far wall where the boot room's exterior door leads to the stable yard. This door is your responsibility, not the butler's, because it technically opens from the servant's wing. You turn the key twice. This lock has a double throw mechanism, and test the handle with enough force to verify that, yes, it's truly secure. Through the small window set into the door, you can see the stable yard in gathering darkness, the cobblestones gleaming wetly from the earlier rain. You remember a quirky incident from 3 years ago, when a fox somehow got into the boot room through this very door and created absolute chaos among the carefully arranged footwear. The family found it hilarious when they heard about it at breakfast. You found it significantly less amusing, especially when you discovered that the boot boy had forgotten to lock up after bringing in the evening's muddy boots. He'd been terrified of dismissal, but you settled for a stern lecture and 2 weeks of extra duties. Everyone deserves a second chance, though certainly not a third. The still room is your next destination, accessed through a door so narrow you have to turn sideways while managing your skirts. This room is your particular domain, the place where you compound medicines, make preserves, and prepare the special delicacies that require a housekeeper's skilled hand. The shelves are crowded with bottles and jars: elderflower cordial from last June, quince jelly, raspberry vinegar for sore throats, laudanum for severe pain, sal volatile for fainting spells, arrowroot for invalids' puddings. The still room window is your biggest security concern in this entire wing. It's larger than the others because you need good light for detailed work, and it opens onto a section of the garden that's shielded from view by overgrown rhododendrons. A determined intruder could force it without being seen from the house's other windows. You check not just the latch but also the frame itself, looking for any signs of tampering, fresh scratches on the paint, splinters in the wood, disturbed dust on the sill. Everything appears secure, but you make a mental note to ask the head gardener to trim back those rhododendrons. Security through visibility, that's always been your philosophy. Better to see potential threats coming than to give them convenient hiding places. You lock the still room door behind you with particular care. The laudanum alone makes this room a target. Opium tinctures are worth serious money on the black market, and you've heard stories of servants in other houses who've developed dependencies. Not on your watch. Every bottle is inventoried weekly, every dose recorded in your leather-bound log. When Lord Thornfield's elderly mother requires her nightly dose for arthritis pain, you personally measure it and personally deliver it, and personally record the amount in your careful copper plate handwriting. The china pantry comes next, though calling it a pantry hardly does justice to the room. It's more like a museum of ceramic history, generations of Thornfield dinnerware accumulated over 200 years. You unlock the door and slip inside, breathing in the faintly dusty smell of old porcelain. The gas lamp in here is particularly dim. You keep it that way deliberately because bright light can fade certain glazes over time. Your eyes scan the shelves automatically, checking for anything amiss. The Crown Derby service from 1802, 47 pieces remaining from the original 60. The blue and white Chinese export porcelain from the 1750s. So valuable that you've had 3 separate pieces appraised by specialists from Christie's auction house. The everyday Staffordshire ware that the family uses for breakfast. Solid and reliable and completely replaceable. Unlike the treasures on the higher shelves. You don't need to inventory everything tonight. That's a weekly task that takes 3 full hours. But you do check the window catches and verify that the cabinet containing the most valuable pieces is properly locked. This cabinet has its own special key, a small brass one that lives on a separate ring you keep in your office safe. Even you don't carry access to the greatest treasures on your daily rounds. As you lock the china pantry and move toward the coal store under the back stairs, you hear footsteps approaching, the familiar quick patter of Mary, the second housemaid. She appears around the corner carrying a coal scuttle, her face smudged with dust. "Evening, Mrs. Blackwood," she says, bobbing a quick curtsy despite her burden. "Evening. Mary, finished upstairs." "Yes, Mum. Just fetching coal for the morning fires." You nod and step aside to let her pass. She knows better than to interrupt your rounds with unnecessary conversation, and you appreciate her efficiency. Mary will make a good head housemaid someday, if she continues to show this level of dedication. You reach the base of the grand staircase and pause, as you always do, to appreciate the architecture that makes Thornfield Manor something more than just another country house. The staircase sweeps upward in a graceful curve, its oak balustrade polished to a deep honey glow by generations of housemaids. Above you, the ceiling rises 2 full stories, crowned by a painted dome depicting classical scenes, Apollo driving his sun chariot, if you remember correctly, though the details are lost in the evening shadows. This is the heart of the house, the central artery through which all life flows. Servants use the back stairs for their daily duties, of course, but the grand staircase is where the family descends for dinner, where important guests make their entrances, where debutante daughters once posed for photographs in their presentation gowns. You've watched 3 generations of Thornfields walk these steps, and you suspect you'll watch at least one more before your service ends. The drawing room doors flank either side of the entrance hall, massive mahogany barriers that weigh perhaps 100 pounds each. You approach the right-hand door first, the music room, technically, though the family has taken to using it as a second drawing room since Lady Thornfield's piano playing declined after her illness 3 years ago. The door handle is brass, ornate with acanthus leaf patterns, and cool beneath your palm as you test it. Locked already. The butler must have secured it after the family finished their after-dinner coffee. You test it again anyway, because trust must always be verified in a house this size. The butler, Mr. Hendricks, is absolutely reliable. But you've learned over 14 years that even the most reliable people occasionally forget details when rushed or distracted. Better to check everything yourself than to assume someone else's diligence. You retrieve the music room key from your ring, a medium-sized brass key with a clover-shaped bow, and unlock the door just to verify that your key still works properly. Sometimes locks develop quirks, especially in rooms that aren't used daily. The mechanism turns smoothly, and you crack the door open just wide enough to glimpse inside. The room is perfect. Furniture covers shroud the piano, and the delicate gilt chairs arranged along the walls. The windows are all latched. You can see their brass catches glinting in the moonlight that streams through the tall panes. The fire has been properly damped in the grate, reduced to glowing embers that will die completely within the hour. You close the door, lock it again, and test the handle one final time. Historians still argue whether the Victorian obsession with drawing rooms, houses like this one often had 3 or 4 separate formal reception rooms, represented genuine need or simply social posturing. After all, how many spaces does one family truly require for sitting and conversing? But you understand the logic in ways that scholars sitting in university libraries never could. Different rooms for different occasions, different moods, different levels of formality. The music room for intimate gatherings, the great drawing room for balls and receptions, the morning room for ladies' afternoon calls, the library for gentlemen's quiet contemplation. The great drawing room occupies the opposite side of the entrance hall, and its double doors require 2 different keys to secure properly. The main lock is obvious a substantial mechanism that throws a bolt as thick as your thumb, but there's also a secondary lock hidden in the doorframe's upper corner, installed after a burglary attempt in 1869. You unlock both, slip inside, and allow yourself a moment to appreciate the room's grandeur. Even in darkness, the great drawing room impresses. Your eyes have adjusted enough to make out the massive chandelier hanging from the ceiling centre, its crystal pendants catching stray light from the entrance hall. The furniture here isn't covered. The family used this room just this afternoon for receiving the vicar and his wife. You can still smell the faint sweetness of the hothouse roses that Lady Thornfield insists on having fresh daily, regardless of season. You cross to the windows, 5 tall windows facing the south lawn, and check each latch individually. This is where you slow down, where methodical attention becomes crucial. A single unlocked window in a ground floor room like this is an invitation to disaster. Your fingers work automatically, pressing each latch to ensure it's fully engaged, testing each window pane for looseness in its frame. The 4th window gives you pause. The latch feels different, somehow not loose. Exactly, but not quite as tight as the others. You lean closer, examining it in the dim light. There, a hairline crack in the brass where the handle meets the base plate. It's still functional, still secure, but it won't be for long. Brass fatigue, the estate locksmith calls it. Metal that's been turned thousands of times over decades eventually develops stress fractures. You pull a small notebook from your chatelaine and you keep it there specifically for observations like this and make a note in pencil. Greer, drawing RM 4th window latch, replace urgent. The locksmith visits every Wednesday. You'll have him address it in 3 days' time. This is the kind of detail that separates adequate housekeepers from exceptional ones. Waiting until the latch breaks completely would mean a night with an unsecured window, and that's simply unacceptable. A quirky detail catches your eye as you prepare to leave. Someone has left a book on the side table near the fireplace. You recognise it as Lord Thornfield's copy of Tennyson's poems, probably abandoned when he rose for dinner. You should leave it for the morning housemaid to reshelve properly, but something makes you pick it up instead. The leather binding is warm from sitting near the fire, and the pages fall open to The Lady of Shalott, with a silk bookmark at that exact poem. You smile to yourself, remembering how Lord Thornfield read that same poem aloud to his daughters when they were children, affecting dramatic voices for the different stanzas. He's better master than many you've heard about from other housekeepers' fare, consistent, neither overly familiar nor coldly distant. You set the book back exactly where you found it, positioned at the same angle. He'll notice if it's moved, and there's something comforting about that level of attention to detail. You and Lord Thornfield are alike in that way, though you'd never presume to say so aloud. You secure both locks on the drawing room doors and test them thoroughly. The secondary lock requires a particularly firm turn, and you've learned to put your shoulder against the door frame for leverage. They're both bolts fully engaged, both handles tested and found immobile. The library doors stand directly across from the main staircase, and you approach them with a mixture of affection and trepidation. The library is your favourite room in the entire house, a 2-storey space lined floor to ceiling with books collected by 5 generations of Thornfields. But it's also the most complex room to secure, with 12 separate windows, 2 doors, and a spiral staircase leading to the gallery level. You unlock the main doors. These require yet another unique key. This one particularly ornate, with the family crest engraved on its bow and step into the book-scented darkness. The library always smells the same old leather, paper, beeswax polish, and that indefinable mustiness that accumulates in rooms full of aging volumes. It's not an unpleasant smell. In fact, you find it rather soothing. The windows here are your primary concern. 12 tall windows, 6 on each of the long walls, each one a potential entry point. You begin your circuit clockwise, starting with the window nearest the door. Check the latch, test the frame, verify the lock, move to the next window, repeat. Your movements are so practiced that your hands work almost independently of your conscious thought, leaving your mind free to wander. You think about the book you glimpsed in the scullery maid's room, earlier that romantic novel she'd hidden under her pillow. You were young once too, though it feels like another lifetime. Did you read forbidden novels? Certainly. Did you dream of something beyond domestic service? Absolutely. But somewhere along the way, duty became not just acceptable but satisfying, and the weight of these keys transformed from burden into badge of honour. The spiral staircase to the gallery creaks under your weight as you ascend. The gallery windows are smaller but no less important to check. You ascend to the second floor via the grand staircase, your hand trailing along the polished balustrade that generations of Thornfields have touched before you. The steps are wide and shallow, designed for ladies in elaborate gowns to climb gracefully without losing breath or dignity. Your own black bombazine skirts whisper against the carpet runner as you climb, and you're conscious of keeping your footfalls soft. Dinner has concluded by now, but the family hasn't yet retired, and you have no desire to disturb their evening routines with the clatter of your rounds. The second floor is where delicacy becomes essential. This is the family's private domain, their bedchambers, dressing rooms, and personal sitting rooms. You're trusted to enter these spaces. Of course, your position demands it, but there's an unspoken protocol about how you move through these rooms, especially in the evening hours when the family might be in various states of undress or repose. You knock softly before entering any room, even when you're certain it's unoccupied. You keep your eyes averted from personal items, letters on writing desks, clothing laid out for the next day, books on bedside tables. Privacy is a privilege of rank, and you guard it as carefully as you guard the silver. The corridor that runs the length of the second floor is broader than the servants' passages below, and the carpet here is thick enough to swallow sound completely. Portraits line the walls, previous earls and countesses of Thornfield, their painted eyes seeming to follow you as you pass. You've grown accustomed to their watchful gazes over the years. Sometimes you fancy that old Lady Thornfield, the one in the 1680s portrait with the elaborate lace collar, looks particularly approving when you pause to straighten a frame or adjust a curtain. Lady Thornfield's suite occupies the eastern corner, a collection of interconnected rooms that includes her bedroom, dressing room, sitting room, and a small private bathroom, a modern addition installed just 5 years ago when indoor plumbing reached this wing. You tap lightly on the bedroom door and wait. No response. You tap again, slightly louder. Still nothing. She must be downstairs in the drawing room with Lord Thornfield. Or perhaps she's retired to the conservatory where she often reads before bed. You turn your key in the lock and ease the door open. The bedroom is a symphony of rose and cream rose silk wallpaper, cream damask curtains, rose velvet upholstery on the chairs flanking the fireplace. The four-poster bed dominates the room, its curtains tied back to reveal fresh linens that the housemaid turned down earlier. On the bedside table sits a small silver bell that Lady Thornfield rings if she requires assistance during the night. Your first priority is the window's 3 tall sashes that overlook the formal gardens. You cross to each one, checking latches with your usual methodical precision. The middle window gives you a moment's concern. The latch feels slightly loose, wiggling more than it should when you test it. You examine it more closely and discover that one of the screws anchoring the latch to the frame has worked partially free. You retrieve your small wrench from the chatelaine and tighten it carefully, testing afterward to ensure a snug fit. The dressing room door stands ajar, and you slip inside to check its single window. This room always makes you slightly uncomfortable, though you couldn't precisely explain why. Perhaps it's the intimacy of the space, the wardrobes full of Lady Thornfield's gowns, the dressing table crowded with crystal perfume bottles and silver-backed hairbrushes, the full-length mirror that reflects your own severe black figure so starkly against all this feminine luxury. The window here is secured, but you notice that the curtain has been pulled back carelessly, bunched to one side instead of properly arranged. You take a moment to fix it, smoothing the heavy velvet into even folds. This is the kind of detail that the housemaid should catch, but they are often rushed during evening turndown, and sometimes small things slip past them. You make a mental note to speak to Sarah, the head housemaid, about maintaining standards even when pressed for time. Historians still argue whether the elaborate privacy rituals of Victorian upper classes separate bedrooms for husbands and wives. Dressing rooms, private sitting rooms represented genuine preference, or simply the physical manifestation of emotional distance. You've served the Thornfields long enough to know that in their case, at least, the arrangement is more practical than symbolic. Lord Thornfield rises at dawn for a state business. Lady Thornfield is a night owl who reads until the small hours. Separate bedrooms allow each to maintain their preferred schedule without disturbing the other. Lord Thornfield's suite mirrors his wife's on the western side of the corridor, though the decor is decidedly more masculine dark green walls, heavy mahogany furniture, sporting prints depicting hunting scenes and racehorses. You knock and enter, moving immediately to the windows, 4 in the bedroom, 2 in the dressing room, all of them secured. His room always feels more orderly than his wife's. Everything's squared away and precisely positioned. The military training of his youth never quite left him. You suspect. The guest bedrooms require careful attention because they're used irregularly, and rooms that sit empty for weeks at a time have a tendency to develop problems. You work your way through the blue bedroom, the rose bedroom, the Chinese bedroom, so called for the hand-painted wallpaper depicting scenes of pagodas and willow trees that some previous Thornfield imported at tremendous expense in the 1840s. Each room follows the same pattern check windows. Test door locks from both sides. Verify that fireplace dampers are properly closed to prevent downdrafts. In the Chinese bedroom, you discover that a bird has somehow gotten into the chimney. You can hear it fluttering and chirping in distress somewhere in the flue. You make a note to have the chimney sweep investigate tomorrow. A bird trapped in a chimney can die there, and the smell of decomposition would make the room unusable for weeks. The nursery wing occupies its own section at the northern end of the corridor, separated from the adult bedrooms by a green baize door similar to the one dividing servants' territory from family spaces. This door is designed to muffle sound to prevent children's noise from disturbing their parents, though you've always thought it works equally well in reverse. Protecting children from adult conflicts and concerns, you open the door quietly and find yourself in a different world. The nursery corridor is brighter, painted a cheerful yellow that seems to hold sunlight even at night. Children's artwork hangs on the walls in simple frames, watercolour paintings of flowers and animals, executed with varying degrees of skill by the Thornfield daughters during their childhood years. Most are old now. The youngest daughter is 17 and long past the nursery stage. But the artwork remains. A cheerful ghost of earlier, simpler times. The night nursery stands empty, its furniture shrouded in dust covers. You remember when this room bustled with activity nursemaids carrying squalling infants, the wet nurse in her rocking chair, the endless parade of bottles and nappies and tiny gowns. Now it's silent, waiting for the next generation of Thornfields to bring it back to life. Young Master Robert, the eldest son, married last year, perhaps by this time next year. You'll be supervising nursemaids once again. The day nursery is similarly quiet, though it maintains a more lived-in feeling. The Thornfield daughters still occasionally retreat here when they want solitude, claiming the comfortable window seat where they spent hours reading as children. You check the windows, 4 large ones that flood the room with southern light during the day, and find everything properly secured. A quirky detail catches your attention. Someone has left a china doll sitting in the rocking chair near the fireplace. You recognise it as belonging to Miss Charlotte, the youngest daughter, though she's far too old for dolls now. The doll stares at you with painted blue eyes, its porcelain face serene and slightly unsettling in the dim gaslight. You resist the urge to turn it around. There's something about doll's eyes that has always made you vaguely uncomfortable. A feeling you've never quite been able to shake despite your practical nature. You descend back to the first floor via the servants' staircase, a narrow, utilitarian passage that connects all levels of the house like a hidden spine. The steps are steeper here, worn smooth in the centres by countless footsteps over 2 centuries, and you navigate them carefully in the dim light. At the bottom, you pause to let a footman pass carrying a tray of empty brandy glasses from Lord Thornfield's study. He nods respectfully, pressing himself against the wall to give you room, and you continue on toward the library's inner sanctum. The library at Thornfield Manor isn't just a room, it's a cathedral of knowledge. A 2-storey space that houses approximately 8,000 volumes accumulated across 5 generations. You've heard the family's book collection described as modest but distinguished by a visiting scholar from Oxford, which you took to mean valuable without being overwhelming. The books range from medieval manuscripts in Latin that no one in the current family can read, to the latest 3-volume novels from Mudie's lending library that Lady Thornfield devours at an alarming rate. You unlock the library's secondary door, the one that connects it to Lord Thornfield's study, and step into the space that requires your most meticulous attention. The main floor windows you checked earlier, but now you must address the special locks that protect the library's greatest treasures. The rare book collection resides in a series of glass-fronted cabinets along the western wall, each one fitted with its own lock designed to deter not just burglars but also light, dust and humidity. The first cabinet contains the manuscript collection Illuminated Psalters, Medieval Herbals, a book of hours that supposedly belonged to a minor member of Henry VIII's court. You unlock the cabinet with one of the smallest keys on your ring, a delicate brass instrument barely larger than a modern house key, and carefully open the glass door just wide enough to verify that everything inside remains undisturbed. The manuscripts rest on velvet-covered boards, arranged spine up to prevent the fragile bindings from warping. You've been trained never to touch these treasures directly. Lord Thornfield demonstrated the proper handling technique years ago, showing you how the oils from human skin can permanently stain vellum pages that have survived 500 years of careful preservation. If you must move a manuscript to check behind it for signs of pest damage, for instance, you use clean cotton gloves kept in a drawer specifically for this purpose. The second cabinet houses the incunabula books printed before 1501, when printing was still a relatively new technology. There are 17 of them, including a Nuremberg Chronicle from 1493 that Lord Thornfield once told you was worth more than a skilled craftsman's lifetime earnings. You peer through the glass, counting spines to ensure all 17 are present. A quirky habit? Perhaps, since no one could have entered a locked cabinet to steal them, but you've learned that verification brings peace of mind. Historians still argue whether the Victorian obsession with collecting and categorizing whether books, butterflies, or botanical specimens represented genuine intellectual curiosity, or simply another form of conspicuous consumption. A way for the wealthy to display their refinement. You suspect the truth lies somewhere between the two extremes. Lord Thornfield genuinely loves his books. You've seen him handle them with a tenderness that reveals true appreciation. But he also enjoys showing the collection to visitors, watching their impressed reactions to particularly rare volumes. The third and fourth cabinets contain first editions of English literature Shakespeare folios, early Milton, original printings of Swift and Pope. These are Lord Thornfield's particular pride, and he spent considerable sums at London auction houses acquiring them. You check each lot carefully, testing them with gentle pressure to ensure the mechanisms haven't dried out or corroded. Cabinet locks are different from door locks. They're more delicate, more prone to failure if not regularly maintained. The library's spiral staircase leads to the gallery level, where additional bookcases line the walls beneath windows set high enough to provide light without risking sun damage to the spines below. You climb carefully, one hand on the iron railing, your keys jangling softly with each step. The gallery floor is original to the house 17th century oak planks worn smooth and slightly uneven, requiring careful attention to avoid catching your heel in the gaps. Up here, the windows are your concern, 6 of them, smaller than those on the main floor but no less important to security. The gallery windows overlook the south lawn, and they are accessible from the roof of the conservatory below, at least theoretically. You've never tested that route yourself, but you've walked the perimeter enough times to know that a determined intruder with a ladder could potentially reach these windows. You check each latch with extra care, looking not just for security, but for any signs of tampering. Fresh scratches around a lock, Disturbed dust on a windowsill, a bent latch that wasn't bent yesterday. These are the details that could mean the difference between preventing a burglary and discovering one too late. The third window shows some weathering around the frame where rain has gotten in. You add it to your growing list of items for the estate carpenter to address. From up here, you can see down into the main library floor, and the view always gives you a strange feeling, as if you're observing the room from outside yourself, seeing it as a visitor might. The long reading table down the centre, the leather armchairs positioned near the fireplace, the globe in the corner that's so old it shows California as an island. This is where Lord Thornfield spent his boyhood afternoons, and where his son now studies estate management and agricultural theory. The final cabinet requiring special attention sits on the gallery level, tucked into an alcove that shields it from direct light. This one contains the family archives, not books but documents. Land deeds going back to 1550 marriage settlements, wills, letters from ancestors who fought at Waterloo and Trafalgar, birth and death records that trace the Thornfield lineage through centuries of English history. This cabinet has a double lock mechanism, requiring 2 separate keys turned simultaneously. You've practiced this manoeuvre hundreds of times, but it still requires concentration. You select both keys from your ring. They're marked with tiny notches so you can identify them by touch and insert them into their respective keyholes. Then, with a smooth, coordinated motion, you turn both keys clockwise until you feel the bolts slide home. The mechanism makes a satisfying double click that echoes slightly in the gallery's acoustic space. As you descend the spiral staircase, you remember a story old Mrs. Pemberton told you during your first week as head housekeeper. Apparently, back in the 1840s, a visiting scholar became so absorbed in reading a medieval manuscript that he failed to notice the household retiring for the night. The poor man ended up locked in the library until morning, having spent the entire night reading by candlelight rather than calling out for release and admitting his absent-mindedness. Lord Thornfield's grandfather found it hilarious, and invited the scholar back the following year, this time with strict instructions about library hours. You pause at the main library doors to take one final survey of the space. Everything is as it should be, windows secured, rare books locked away, fire properly damped in the grate. The room settles into its nighttime quiet, the thousands of books seeming to exhale collectively as you prepare to leave. You've always felt that libraries have a particular quality after dark, not eerie. Exactly, but weighted with the presence of all those words, all those thoughts preserved on paper, waiting patiently for morning readers. You lock the library's main doors from the outside and test them thoroughly. The lock here is substantial, a 4-lever mechanism that would take a skilled lockpick considerable time to defeat. You give the doors a firm shake, satisfying yourself that both are properly secured, then continue your rounds toward the dining room and the morning room. You continue along the first floor corridor toward the silver pantry, your mind already cataloguing the complex security measures that protect Thornfield Manor's most materially valuable possessions. The silver collection isn't just tableware, it's a tangible record of the family's wealth and status accumulated over 200 years. From the earliest Georgian pieces to the elaborate Victorian centerpieces commissioned by the current Earl's grandfather, the total value, according to the last insurance appraisal in 1885, exceeds £12,000 more than most people will earn in a lifetime of labour. The silver pantry sits adjacent to the butler's pantry, the 2 rooms forming a secure vault at the heart of the service areas. The door itself is formidable, 3 inches of solid oak reinforced with iron straps, hung on hinges that could support twice its weight. You approach it with the respect it deserves, fishing through your keyring for the large brass key with a distinctive square bow. The lock mechanism on this door is unlike any other in the house. It's a Chubb detector lock, installed in 1878 after a spate of country house burglaries across the county. The beauty of the Chubb system is its cleverness. If someone attempts to pick the lock, the mechanism jams itself, and even the correct key won't open it until a special reset procedure is performed. You've never had to deal with a jammed lock, thank heavens. But Mr. Hendricks the butler drilled you on the reset procedure when the lock was first installed. You insert the key and feel the familiar resistance as the 6 levers align. The lock requires a full 2 rotations of the key before the bolt withdraws, and you count the turns automatically, 1 complete revolution, then another, then the satisfying chunk as the bolt clears the strike plate. You pull the heavy door open and step into the silver pantry's cool interior. The room is windowless by design. No windows means no external access points, though it also means the air in here always feels slightly stale and metallic. Gas lamps bracket the walls, but you don't bother lighting them. The single candle you've brought provides enough illumination for a security check, and there's something appropriate about inspecting the silver by candlelight, as if you've stepped backward into an earlier century. The silver rests in felt-lined drawers and glass-fronted cabinets that line 3 walls. You begin your inspection with the flatware drawers, pulling each one open to verify that the contents remain undisturbed. Fish knives and forks in the first drawer, their silver blades etched with delicate patterns of seaweed and shells. Dinner knives and forks in the second, the handles heavy with the Thornfield crest. Dessert spoons in the third, their bowls catching candlelight and throwing it back in warm glimmers. Each drawer contains exactly the number of pieces recorded in your inventory ledger: 24 fish knives, 24 fish forks, 36 dinner knives, 36 dinner forks, and so on through the complete service. You don't count every piece tonight. That's a monthly task that takes the better part of an afternoon, but you scan each drawer carefully, looking for gaps that might indicate missing items. The serving pieces occupy the upper cabinet's soup tureens, vegetable dishes, sauce boats, entree dishes, all in Georgian silver so heavily decorated that they seem to writhe with cast and chased ornament. A particularly magnificent piece catches your eye, a centrepiece designed to look like a ship in full sail, created by Paul Storr in 1815 to celebrate Wellington's victory at Waterloo. You've heard Lord Thornfield say it's worth £500 on its own, though he'd never dream of selling it. Historians still argue whether the Victorian and Georgian obsession with elaborate silver services represented refined taste or grotesque excess. Looking at some of these pieces, a fish slice so ornate it's practically unusable. A wine coaster with decorations so deep you can barely clean it properly. You sometimes lean toward the excess interpretation. But there's artistry here too. Craftsmanship that transformed functional objects into something approaching sculpture. You check the locks on each cabinet, working your way systematically around the room. Every lock must be tested, every handle verified as secure. The candlestick cabinet requires particular attention. Silver candlesticks are relatively easy to sell and thus particularly attractive to thieves. You count them quickly, 16 pairs in various heights and styles, all present and accounted for. The strongroom door occupies the far wall, a second barrier protecting the most valuable pieces. This door has its own lock, even more complex than the one on the pantry's main entrance. The key for this lock hangs on a separate small ring that you keep in your office safe, never on your person during daily rounds. You verify that this door is locked without opening it. Tuesday mornings are when you conduct the full inventory of the strongroom's contents. A quirky superstition has developed among housekeepers regarding silver pantries: never turn your back on open silver drawers. The logic supposedly relates to preventing theft by remaining vigilant. but you suspect the real origin is more prosaic. Silver drawers are heavy, and more than one housekeeper has probably been injured by a drawer that rolled open and struck her from behind. Still, you honour the superstition, always facing the drawers as you work your way around the room. You notice a small tarnish spot on one of the sauce boats, just a fingertip size darkening near the rim, where someone touched the silver without proper gloves. You make a mental note to have the silver boy polish it tomorrow. The staff knows better than to handle silver bare-handed. But sometimes, in the rush of a formal dinner service, protocol slips. You don't tolerate tarnish. It's unprofessional and suggests a laxity of standards that can spread through a household-like infection. The silver pantry also houses the family's gold plate, a much smaller collection but even more valuable. 3 dozen pieces in total dinner plates, dessert plates, and serving dishes commissioned by the 3rd Earl in 1750, when gold plate was the ultimate status symbol. You check the cabinet where these treasures reside, peering through the glass to verify that the stack of plates appears undisturbed. The gold gleams differently from silver, warmer, richer, almost organic in its lustre. You've only handled the gold plate a handful of times in 14 years, always under Lord Thornfield's direct supervision. Always for the most important occasions. The Prince of Wales dined here in 1882, and the gold service was brought out for that meal. You remember the tension in the household that day, the absolute terror of something going wrong, the relief when His Royal Highness departed and every piece could be counted and locked away again. The final items requiring inspection are the trophy cups and presentation pieces occupying a dedicated cabinet near the door. These are Lord Thornfield's racing trophies, silver cups, won by his horses at various meets across England. They're valuable both materially and sentimentally, and he's quite particular about their care. Each cup must be polished until you can see your reflection in it, and the engraved inscriptions must be clearly legible. You verify that all 12 cups are present, reading the inscriptions by candlelight. Ascot Gold Cup 1879 Thornfield's Midnight Runner. Newmarket Stakes 1881 Thornfield's Swift Justice. And so on through victories stretching back to the current Earl's father's time. Horse racing is an expensive hobby, but these cups prove it can occasionally pay dividends. As you prepare to leave the silver pantry, you perform one final check that misses. Pemberton taught you years ago, you close your eyes and simply listen. A good housekeeper, she said, can hear problems that eyes might miss: the drip of water from a leaking pipe, the scratch of a mouse in the walls, the creak of a loose floorboard. You stand perfectly still for 30 seconds, hearing nothing but your own breathing and the distant ticking of the long case clock in the entrance hall. Satisfied, you exit the pantry and engage the chub lock, turning the key through its 2 full rotations and testing the door handle firmly. The door doesn't budge. You test it again, pulling harder, verifying that the lock has fully engaged. Only then do you proceed to your next destination. You make your way toward the nursery wing with a lighter step than usual. Though you're careful to maintain your professional demeanour, there's something about checking on children's spaces that softens even the most rigid housekeeper's heart, and you've never quite managed to develop immunity to that particular sentiment. The nursery wing at Thornfield Manor occupies the southeastern corner of the 2nd floor. Positioned to catch maximum morning sunlight, a deliberate architectural choice meant to benefit growing children who might otherwise spend too much time in gloomy rooms. The approach to the nursery requires passing through what the family calls the schoolroom corridor, a section of hallway lined with framed samplers and watercolours created by generations of young Thornfields during their lessons. You pause briefly to straighten one that's hanging slightly askew, a cross-stitch alphabet worked by the current Lady Thornfield when she was 7 years old. The stitches are uneven, and the letter Q appears backward, but it's been preserved behind glass and displayed with the same care as the valuable paintings downstairs. The night nursery door stands ajar, which immediately puts you on alert. Doors in a properly run household should be either fully open or fully closed. Halfway positions suggest carelessness or haste. You push the door wider and peer inside, relaxing when you see young Nurse Morrison sitting in the rocking chair beside the small fireplace, mending what appears to be a child's nightgown by the light of 2 candles. "Mrs. Blackwood," she whispers, rising quickly and executing a small curtsy despite her informal attire. "I didn't expect you quite yet. Evening, Nurse Morrison, all quiet with the children." You keep your voice low, though you know the 3 Thornfield grandchildren who currently occupy the nursery are sound sleepers. Silent as lambs. "Ma'am." Master James had a bit of excitement at tea time, claimed he saw a ghost in the corridor, but he settled down nicely after his story. She smiles indulgently, the expression of someone who's heard countless ghost stories from imaginative children. You nod, unsurprised. Old houses breed ghost stories the way damp cellars breed mushrooms. And Thornfield Manor has accumulated its share of spectral tales over the centuries. The grey lady who supposedly walks the long gallery on winter nights, the phantom cavalier who appears before family deaths, the weeping woman in the attic. You've heard them all, and you've yet to encounter anything more supernatural than drafty corridors and settling floorboards. "I'll just do my rounds, then leave you to your mending," you say, moving past her toward the night nursery's 3 windows. The windows here are fitted with special locks designed to prevent curious children from opening them, a safety measure installed after a tragic incident at a neighbouring estate where a child fell from a 2nd-story window. The locks require a key to open from the inside, effectively making the windows immovable barriers. You check each one anyway, verifying that the locks are engaged and that the window frames show no signs of warping or weather damage. The night nursery itself is a monument to careful middle-class childhood. 3 small beds with white coverlets, each bed containing a sleeping child. You can just make out their shapes in the dim light. Master James, age 6, Miss Eleanor, age 4, and baby William, just 14 months old and still in a crib rather than a proper bed. Their breathing creates a gentle rhythm that fills the room with peaceful sound. You cross to the crib and look down at baby William, who sleeps on his back with both arms flung above his head in that abandon that only infants achieve. A wave of something uncomfortably close to maternal feeling washes over you, and you firmly push it aside. You've never married, never had children of your own, and at 46 years old, those possibilities have long since closed. The children in your care are your employer's grandchildren, nothing more, though your heart doesn't always respect that professional boundary. Historians still argue whether the Victorian practice of separating children from their parents, housing them in distant nursery wings, under nurses' supervision, represented enlightened child-rearing or emotional neglect. You've watched the Thornfield family navigate this system for 14 years, and you've concluded that it depends entirely on the individuals involved. Lady Thornfield visits the nursery daily, reading stories and playing games with the children. Lord Thornfield is more distant but not unkind. The children seem happy enough, though you sometimes wonder what they'll remember of these years when they're grown. The day nursery connects to the night nursery through an adjoining door that's always left open for supervision. You pass through it now, entering a brighter, more colourful space, filled with the toys and books and the cheerful chaos of childhood. Even in darkness, you can sense the energy that fills this room. During daylight hours, the shrieking laughter, the pounding feet, the endless questions that young children generate like steam from a kettle. The toy cupboard stands against the far wall, and you check its lock automatically. The cupboard contains not just toys, but also items that could be dangerous in unsupervised small-hand scissors for paper cutting, watercolour paints, wooden building blocks with sharp corners. The lock is engaged, the key safely in Nurse Morrison's possession. You make a mental note of satisfaction. Morrison is young but conscientious, exactly the sort of nursery nurse who rises to head nurse positions in great households. A quirky collection of dolls sits arranged on a shelf near the window, 11 porcelain dolls in various sizes, each one dressed in elaborate costumes representing different historical periods. You recognise them as belonging to Miss Charlotte and Miss Augusta, the Thornfield daughters who've long since outgrown the nursery but occasionally visit to play with their nieces and nephews. The dolls stare at you with glassy eyes, their painted smiles frozen in perpetual cheer. You've never quite understood the appeal of dolls that look so unnervingly lifelike. But then, you're not the target audience. The schoolroom occupies the next room in the sequence, accessible through yet another connecting door. This is where the children spend their morning hours with their governess, Miss Peters, learning reading, writing, arithmetic, geography, and the other accomplishments deemed necessary for upper-class children. The room smells faintly of chalk and ink, and you can see the ghostly remnants of mathematical problems on the slateboard near the windows. 3 windows here, all requiring your attention. You move through your inspection with practiced efficiency, check the latch, test the frame, verify the lock. The middle window needs adjustment. The latch has worked slightly loose, allowing a tiny gap that admits a whisper of cold November air. You tighten it with your wrench, making a note to have the carpenter reinforce it with a longer screw. The schoolroom bookcases hold a fascinating mix of educational and entertaining volumes, McGuffey readers, Cassell's Natural History, illustrated fairy tale collections, atlases showing the pink-shaded extent of the British Empire. You notice that someone has left a book on the reading table, The Water Babies, by Charles Kingsley, open to a page with an illustration of chimney sweeps. You close the book carefully and return it to its proper place on the shelf. The governess's small sitting room adjoins the schoolroom, providing Miss Peters with a private space to prepare lessons and take her meals away from the children's noise. You knock softly before entering, though you know she's downstairs having her supper in the servants' hall. The room is spartanly furnished but comfortable. A narrow bed, a writing desk, a small bookcase, an armchair positioned near the window to catch reading light. Miss Peters is the 4th governess you've supervised during your tenure at Thornfield Manor, and by far the best. She's educated but not pretentious, firm but not harsh, and she genuinely seems to enjoy the children rather than merely tolerating them for her wages. You make a point of treating her with particular respect. Governesses occupy an awkward social position, neither family nor servant, and many households handle them poorly as a result. Her window overlooks the kitchen garden, and you check it while noting approvingly that her room is tidy. The bed is neatly made with hospital corners, the desk clear of clutter, books shelved in alphabetical order by author. These are the habits of a disciplined mind, and you appreciate that quality in the staff who help you run this vast household. You descend the back stairs to the ground floor and turn toward your private domain, the housekeeper's room, a space that serves simultaneously as office, sitting room, and command centre for the entire household's domestic operations. The door bears a small brass plaque reading Vrar, Mrs. E. Blackwood, Housekeeper, a mark of status that distinguishes your room from the anonymous doors leading to storerooms and service areas. You unlock it with one of the keys that lives separately on your chatelaine, kept apart from the general ring because this lock gets used dozens of times each day. The room greets you with familiar comfort, a small fire burning in the grate. One of the under-housemaids lit it an hour ago as part of her evening duties, and the pleasant smell of beeswax polish and lavender sachets. Your sitting room is modest compared to the family's accommodations, but luxurious by servant standards. You have an upholstered armchair, a proper writing desk made of mahogany, a bookcase containing your personal library, and a small table where you take your meals when you are not required to dine with the upper servants in the steward's room. But tonight, you're not here to rest. You cross immediately to the desk and retrieve the leather-bound ledger that serves as your master log a record of every lock checked, every key used, every security measure verified during your nightly rounds. This ledger is perhaps the most important document in your possession, more valuable than any household account book or inventory list. It represents proof of your diligence, evidence that you've fulfilled your primary responsibility of keeping Thornfield Manor secure. You dip your pen in the inkwell and begin writing in your careful copperplate script, dating the entry at the top of a fresh page, the 6th of November 1887, evening security inspection. Below this, you create columns: location, lock status, concerns, action required. The act of recording is meditative, allowing you to review mentally everything you've checked over the past hour and a half. Servants' wing scullery door locked. Secure, coal cellar locked. Mechanism requires maintenance. Wine cellar locked. Triple bolt engaged. Servants' hall windows all secure. One latch tightened. Still room locked. Inventory verified. Boot room locked. Exterior door double bolted. Your pen scratches steadily across the page, the sound mixing with the fire's crackle and the distant clatter of dishes being washed in the scullery. Writing these entries has become so automatic that your mind wanders while your hand continues its work. You think about the new scullery maid, Mary Sullivan, who started last week and seems promising despite her youth. You make a mental note to check on her progress tomorrow. Perhaps offer some guidance about the most efficient way to scrub copper pots. Music room locked. Verified. Great drawing room locked. Fourth window latch requires replacement urgent. Library all locks engaged. Rare book cabinets secured. Gallery windows checked. The notation about the drawing room latch gets underlined twice. You'll speak to Mr. Hendricks first thing tomorrow morning to ensure the locksmith is summoned immediately. Historians still argue whether the Victorian obsession with record-keeping, whether household ledgers, natural history journals, or personal diaries represented admirable thoroughness or neurotic control. You fall firmly on the side of thoroughness. Without records, how would you prove that you'd checked a particular lock if something went missing? How would you track patterns of wear and tear that might indicate necessary repairs? Memory is fallible, ink on paper is eternal. The family wing entries require particular care in their phrasing. You've developed a coded language over the years that allows you to note observations without being indiscreet. Lady Thornfield's dressing room curtain arrangement corrected is more professional than Lady Thornfield's maid is getting sloppy again. Master James mentioned evening excitement to Nurse Morrison is more appropriate than child claims to have seen a ghost. Probably overactive imagination. Silver pantry main door secured with Chubb lock. All drawers and cabinets verified. Strong room door locked. Small tarnish noted on sauce boat assigned to Silverboy for tomorrow. The entry about tarnish might seem petty, but these small notations create accountability. If the tarnish isn't addressed, you'll know exactly when you first identified it and can follow up accordingly. You're interrupted by a soft knock at your door, the distinctive 3-tap pattern that the upper servants use to distinguish themselves from lower staff. Come in, you call, setting down your pen. Mrs. Murray, the cook, enters carrying a small tray with a teapot and 2 cups. She's a sturdy woman of about 50, with a permanently reddened complexion of someone who's spent 30 years working near hot stoves. Thought you might appreciate a cup of tea while you finish your rounds, Mrs. Blackwood. It's been a long day. You gesture toward the second chair near the fire. That's thoughtful of you. Mrs. Murray. Please, sit. I could use a brief rest before I tackle the final inspections. The two of you represent the highest-ranking female servants in the household, housekeeper and cook, the twin pillars supporting the domestic structure. You've worked together for 9 years, ever since Mrs. Murray arrived from her previous position at a London townhouse. The relationship between housekeeper and cook can make or break a household's smooth operation, and you're grateful that you and Mrs. Murray maintain mutual respect rather than the competitive animosity that plagues some establishments. How was dinner received, you ask, accepting a cup of tea and noting approvingly that it's been properly prepared strong. Hot, with just the right amount of milk added. Lord Thornfield sent his compliments on the duck, said the orange sauce was the best I've managed yet, though I think he was being generous. Mrs. Murray smiles, clearly pleased despite her modest disclaimer. The chocolate souffle fell slightly, that new kitchen maid bumped the oven door, but it was still presentable. You make a mental note to speak with the kitchen maid about awareness in a busy kitchen. I'm sure it was excellent regardless. Your soufflés could survive far worse than a gentle bump. The two of you sip tea in comfortable silence for a moment, enjoying the brief respite from your respective responsibilities. This is one of the small privileges of rank, the ability to pause for tea in a private sitting room rather than gulping it down in a crowded servants' hall between tasks. A quirky tradition has developed between you and Mrs. Murray over the years each evening. You exchange one small observation about the day, nothing gossipy or inappropriate, just a tiny detail that caught your attention. It's a way of maintaining human connection in a world of rigid hierarchy and formal protocol. I noticed the roses in the great drawing room today. You offer. The ones from the hothouse? They must have cost a fortune this time of year, but they were absolutely perfect, not a single petal browning at the edges. Mrs. Murray nods thoughtfully. I saw young Timothy, the boot boy, teaching himself to read during his break this afternoon. He had a primer tucked behind the boot blacking tins, sounding out words whenever he thought no one was watching. You file this information away, feeling a small glow of approval. Servants who educate themselves often rise to better positions. Perhaps Timothy has potential beyond boot blacking, after Mrs. Murray departs, she has early morning bread to set before she retires. You return to your ledger and complete the remaining entries. Nursery wing, all rooms inspected, windows secured, children sleeping peacefully, Nurse Morrison attentive and proper, schoolroom windows checked, one latch tightened and noted for carpenter's attention. You consult your pocket watch, a silver piece that was a gift from the previous Lady Thornfield upon your promotion to head housekeeper. 8:47 in the evening. You're making good time. The kitchen and larder areas still require attention, followed by the mysterious locked wing that no one discusses, and finally the most delicate task of all, securing Lord Thornfield's study with its special wax-sealed key. You make your way toward the kitchen through the network of service corridors that form the house's hidden infrastructure passages that allow servants to move between floors and wings without intruding on family spaces. The route takes you past the servants' hall, where you can hear the murmur of conversation and occasional laughter as the lower staff finish their evening meal. You don't interrupt. They're entitled to their brief period of relaxation before bed, and your presence would only make them self-conscious. The kitchen at Thornfield Manor is a cathedral of culinary industry, a vast room with vaulted ceilings blackened by 2 centuries of coal smoke, multiple ranges and ovens, a central work table large enough to butcher a whole pig, and walls lined with copper pots that gleam like burnished gold in the gaslight. Even now, at nearly 9 o'clock, the room radiates warmth from the day's cooking, and the air carries layers of scent-roasted meat, yeast from rising bread dough, the sharp tang of vinegar used for cleaning. The kitchen occupies the northwestern corner of the ground floor, positioned to minimise the distance between preparation areas and the dining room while keeping cooking smells and heat away from the family's living spaces. 3 large windows face the kitchen yard, and these are your primary concern tonight. Windows in working areas like kitchens see constant traffic opened for ventilation during hot cooking sessions, closed against winter cold, opened again to let smoke escape when a pan burns. All that opening and closing takes a toll on latches and frames. You begin with the first window, the one above the massive stone sink where scullery maids spend hours washing dishes and pots. The latch feels solid, but you notice water damage on the wooden frame where condensation has rotted the paint. You test the wood with your fingernail and find it slightly soft, not enough to compromise security tonight, but it will need attention before winter truly sets in. Water damage can progress quickly from cosmetic problem to structural failure, and a rotted window frame is an invitation to intruders. The second window overlooks the herb garden, a small plot where Mrs. Murray grows the fresh herbs she uses daily. Parsley, thyme, sage, rosemary, and mint create a patchwork of green visible even in the dim light from the kitchen. This window's latch is secure, but you notice someone has left it unlatched until quite recently. There's a small puddle of water on the sill from the earlier rain. You make a mental note to remind the kitchen staff about securing windows immediately after use, not waiting until evening. The third window is the largest, positioned to provide maximum light to the main work area. The latch here is a newer installation replaced just last year after the original Victorian fitting finally gave out after decades of use. The new mechanism works smoothly, and you're pleased to see it's holding up well under daily use. Modern engineering does occasionally improve upon old methods, though you'd never admit that to the older servants who view any change with deep suspicion. Beyond the main kitchen lies a warren of specialised rooms, each dedicated to a particular aspect of food, storage and preparation. You move through them systematically, checking locks and latches with practiced efficiency. The scullery first, where 3 deep sinks and multiple draining boards facilitate the endless cycle of washing that keeps a great house running. No windows here. The scullery occupies an interior space, but there's an exterior door that requires your attention. This door opens onto a small courtyard where rubbish bins are kept and where delivery carts drop off supplies. It's a utilitarian entrance, far removed from the grandeur of the main doors, but it's no less important from a security standpoint. You test the door's bolt, a heavy iron bar that slides into a bracket anchored in the stone wall, and find it secure. The door itself shows wear around the edges where countless boots have kicked it open when hands were full of parcels or buckets. Historians still argue whether the elaborate specialisation of Victorian kitchens separate rooms for different tasks. Rigid hierarchies among kitchen staff represented efficiency or wasteful complexity. You've worked in simpler establishments, and you can attest that specialisation does improve workflow when managed properly. The scullery maids focus on washing, the kitchen maids on basic preparation, the cook on actual cooking. Each person knows their role, and tasks flow smoothly from one station to the next. The larder is your next destination, accessed through a heavy door fitted with ventilation grills that allow air circulation while keeping out flies and mice. The temperature inside is noticeably cooler than the kitchen. The larder occupies a north-facing section of the house where sunlight never directly penetrates, and thick stone walls provide natural refrigeration even in summer. Your breath mists slightly as you step inside and raise your candle to illuminate the shelves. The larder is organised with military precision under Mrs. Murray's supervision. Raw meats hang from hooks on one side. Away from dairy products and vegetables, preserved items occupy dedicated shelves. Flour, sugar, and other dry goods rest in lidded bins designed to defeat vermin. You're not here to inventory, that's a weekly task, but you do scan the shelves looking for anything obviously amiss. A side of beef hangs in the meat section, probably delivered today from the home farm. 3 chickens and a brace of pheasants keep it company, their feathers still attached because game birds must hang for several days before plucking and cooking. The sight and smell are familiar to you after years of household management, though you remember being squeamish about hanging meat when you first entered service as a young housemaid. The larder has 2 windows, small ones set high in the wall and covered with fine wire mesh to prevent insects from entering while allowing ventilation. You check both carefully, verifying that the mesh shows no tears and that the wooden frames are secure. A torn wire mesh might seem trivial, but it could allow flies to contaminate food stores, potentially causing illness among the household. You notice a quirky detail as you conduct your inspection. Someone has placed a small china cat on one of the shelves, positioned as if guarding the cheese. It's clearly Mrs. Murray's work. She has an odd sense of humour that occasionally manifests in unexpected ways. The cat stares at you with painted blue eyes, its expression suggesting it takes its cheese guarding duties very seriously. The dry goods store connects to the larder through a low doorway that requires you to duck slightly. This room houses the bulk supplies that keep a household of this size fed for months. 100-pound sacks of flour, barrels of oats and barley, wooden boxes of tea, sugar cones wrapped in blue paper, salt in ceramic crocks. The quantities would seem absurd in a smaller household, but Thornfield Manor goes through supplies at an astonishing rate. 23 servants eat 3 meals daily. That's 69 meals just for staff, not counting the family's more elaborate requirements. A single breakfast for the servants' hall might consume 2 dozen eggs, 4 loaves of bread, 3 pounds of butter, and a gallon of porridge. Multiply that across every meal, every day, every week, and the numbers become staggering. You check the single window in the dry goods store, a narrow opening that provides minimal light but adequate ventilation. The latch is ancient, probably original to the house's construction, but it still functions adequately. You test it twice, hearing the satisfying click as it engages. You finish securing the larder and pause at the threshold of a corridor. You rarely traverse the passage leading to the east wing. The section of Thornfield Manor that exists in a state of permanent twilight. The air here feels different, colder, staler, weighted with decades of accumulated dust and silence. You've walked this corridor hundreds of times over 14 years, but it never quite loses its capacity to unsettle you, though you'd never admit such foolishness aloud. The East Wing was closed in 1875 when the previous Earl died, and his widow decided that maintaining unused rooms was an unnecessary expense. 12 years have passed since then, and the wing has settled into genteel decay, not ruined exactly, but suspended in time like a pocket watch that stopped ticking. The family occasionally discusses reopening it, particularly when hosting large house parties, but the cost of refurbishment always proves prohibitive, so the rooms remain locked, their contents hidden beneath dust sheets, their windows shuttered against the light, Your keyring contains 7 keys for the East Wing 1 master key that opens the main access door, and 6 individual keys for specific rooms that contain items of particular value or sensitivity. You've never been told explicitly why certain rooms require their own locks, while others can remain secured only by the main door. But you've developed theories over the years, family secrets. You suspect every great house has them, tucked away in locked rooms where curious eyes can't reach. The main access door stands at the end of the corridor, imposing despite its peeling paint and tarnished hardware. You select the master key, a large iron skeleton key that looks medieval in its simplicity, and insert it into the lock. The mechanism resists, sticky from disuse, and you have to apply firm pressure while turning. Finally, with a grinding protest, the bolt withdraws and the door swings inward on hinges that shriek like wounded birds. The smell hits you immediately: dust, mildew, dry rot, and something else you can never quite identify, the scent of abandonment. Perhaps, or simply time itself made tangible. You raise your candle higher, illuminating a corridor identical to the ones in the active portions of the house, except for the thick layer of dust coating every surface and the cobwebs draped across the ceiling like spectral bunting. Your footsteps leave clear prints in the dust as you advance down the corridor, and you experience the odd sensation of being the only person to have walked here in months. Mr. Hendricks the butler checks the East Wing quarterly, and the occasional housemaid is sent in to verify that no leaks have developed, but otherwise this section of the house exists untouched by human presence. The first room on your left is what was once a lady's sitting room, judging by the furniture shapes visible beneath dust sheets. You don't enter, your instructions are clear about checking only the rooms with individual locks, but you pause at the doorway to verify that nothing appears disturbed. The dust on the floor shows no footprints except your own from 3 months ago, already softened and fading but still faintly visible. Historians still argue whether the Victorian practice of closing off portions of large houses represented practical economics or the beginning of aristocratic decline. You've heard it suggested that families who couldn't afford to maintain their ancestral homes should have sold them rather than allowing sections to deteriorate. But you find that perspective overly simplistic. These houses aren't just buildings, they're repositories of family history, physical manifestations of lineage and continuity. Selling Thornfield Manor would be like selling the Thornfield name itself. The first locked room you encounter is marked in your ledger as East Wing Blue Bedroom. The door is solid oak, darker than others in the corridor, and fitted with a lock that's significantly more elaborate than standard bedroom locks. You select the appropriate key from your ring, marked with a tiny notch on the bow that you can identify by touch, and unlock the door. Inside, the room feels frozen in 1875, preserved exactly as it was when the wing closed. A 4-poster bed dominates the space, its hangings still partially drawn despite the dust sheets covering the mattress. A dressing table holds an array of bottles and boxes, their contents long since dried or spoiled, but their positions undisturbed. A wardrobe stands against the far wall, and you've been told, though never verified personally, that it still contains clothing from the previous generation. Your responsibility here is limited. Check the 2 windows to ensure they remain properly shuttered and locked from the inside. Verify that no water damage has developed on the ceiling or walls. Confirm that the room appears otherwise undisturbed. You move through these tasks efficiently, trying to ignore the melancholy atmosphere of a room prepared for an occupant who will never arrive. The windows are secure, shuttered and latched as they've been for 12 years. No water stains mark the ceiling. The dust on the floor shows no prints except your own from previous inspections. You exit, lock the door, and continue down the corridor. A quirky detail catches your attention as you walk. Someone has left a child's ball in the corridor. resting against the wall as if waiting for a playmate to return. The ball is covered in dust like everything else, suggesting it's been here for years. But you have no memory of seeing it during previous inspections. You pick it up, brushing away dust to reveal faded paint depicting a pastoral scene, shepherds and sheep in an idealized landscape. How did it get here? When you add it to the growing collection of minor mysteries that accumulate in old houses, the second locked room is labelled in your ledger simply as East Wing Private Sitting Room, which tells you nothing about why it requires its own key. You unlock it and step inside, finding a smaller, more intimate space than the bedroom. A writing desk occupies the window alcove, and bookcases line 2 walls, their contents still visible through the dust-clouded glass doors. You cross to the desk and check the window behind it, finding the shutters secure. As you turn to leave, something makes you pause, a feeling that something in the room has changed since your last inspection, though you can't identify what. You scan the space carefully, comparing it to your memory of previous visits. There, on the desk, a book that wasn't there 3 months ago, you're certain of it. The desk surface has been empty on every previous inspection, the dust undisturbed except for your own careful touches, but now a slim volume rests there, its leather cover dark against the desk's lighter wood. You approach cautiously, as if the book might somehow be dangerous. Dust covers it like everything else in the room, but the dust pattern is wrong too, even too recently settled. Someone has been in this room since your last inspection. Someone placed this book here deliberately. Your hand trembles slightly as you reach for the volume, and you curse yourself for the weakness. You're a rational woman, a professional housekeeper, not some nervous girl frightened by shadows. You pick up the book and carry it to your candle for better light. It's a journal bound in dark green leather with no title or marking on the cover. You open it to the first page and read the inscription written in faded ink. The Private Reflections of Margaret Thornfield, 1850 to 1872. Your breath catches. Margaret Thornfield was the previous Earl's sister, who died young under circumstances the family never discusses in your hearing. You close the journal quickly, your professional instincts overriding curiosity. This is family business, private business, nothing to do with your responsibilities. But the question remains who placed it here, and why you carry the journal with you as you complete your inspection of the sitting room, intending to report its appearance to Lord Thornfield tomorrow. You exit the mysterious sitting room with Margaret Thornfield's journal tucked securely under your arm, your mind churning with questions that have no immediate answers. The discovery has unsettled your usual methodical calm, but you force yourself to continue the inspection with professional detachment. There are still 4 locked rooms in the East Wing to check, and allowing yourself to become distracted would be a dereliction of duty. The third locked room bears a brass plate reading Morning Room, though you've never understood why a morning room would require such elaborate security. You unlock it and step inside, finding yourself in a space that once must have been cheerful, pale yellow wallpaper, now faded and peeling in places, depicts songbirds perched among flowering branches. The furniture here is more delicate than in other rooms, gilt chairs with needlepoint seats, a small writing desk with cabriolet legs, a display cabinet that once held porcelain figurines. The display cabinet draws your attention because it's the only piece not covered by dust sheets. Glass-fronted and locked with its own small key, it stands empty except for a single item on the middle shelf, a miniature portrait in an oval frame, perhaps 3 inches tall. You approach and peer through the dusty glass at the painted face of a young woman with dark hair and serious eyes. No nameplate identifies her, but something about the bone structure suggests Thornfield lineage. You check the room's 2 windows, both properly shuttered and locked, and note with concern that water has seeped in around the frame of the eastern window. A brown stain spreads across the wallpaper beneath it, and when you touch the wall, your fingers come away damp. You make a detailed note in your mental ledger: East Wing morning room water ingress. Eastern window requires urgent attention. Left unaddressed. Water damage can compromise structural integrity and create conditions for destructive mould growth. As you lock the morning room and proceed deeper into the wing, you become aware of sounds that have no obvious source. The creak of floorboards settling, the whisper of drafts through gaps in the shutters, the distant groan of old timbers adjusting to temperature changes. Old houses are never truly silent. They breathe and shift and speak in their own language. You've learned to distinguish between ordinary house sounds and genuine causes for concern. But tonight, with Margaret Thornfield's journal pressing against your ribs, every creak seems fraught with significance. The fourth locked room is the largest in the East Wing, a bedroom suite that once belonged to the previous Earl himself, before his death in 1875 prompted the wing's closure. You unlock the door with a key that's noticeably more worn than the others, suggesting this room was accessed more frequently in the past, perhaps for sentimental reasons. The Earl's bedroom is a monument to masculine Victorian taste: dark wood panelling, heavy furniture, deep burgundy fabrics visible beneath protective sheets. A massive wardrobe occupies most of one wall, and you know from previous inspections that it still contains the Earl's clothing, morning coats and evening dress, riding habits and smoking jackets, all hanging in mothballed darkness waiting for an owner who will never return. Historians still argue whether the Victorian custom of preserving deceased relatives' rooms unchanged represented healthy mourning or morbid obsession. You've seen both extremes in your career: families who stripped rooms bare within days of a death, and others who maintained bedrooms as virtual shrines for decades. The Thornfields fall somewhere in the middle. They've preserved the Earl's belongings but closed the room to daily use, neither forgetting nor dwelling obsessively on their loss. The bedroom has 4 windows, all requiring inspection. You work your way around the room systematically, and at the 3rd window you discover another instance of water damage more extensive than in the morning room. The windowsill is soft with rot, and when you press it with your thumb, the wood gives way alarmingly. This will require more than the carpenter's attention. The entire window frame may need replacement. You're making notes about the window damage when you hear it. Footsteps in the corridor outside. Distinct, deliberate footsteps approaching the bedroom door. You freeze, candle raised, heart suddenly pounding against your ribs. No one should be in the East Wing. No one except you has keys to these rooms. The footsteps stop directly outside the door. "Mrs. Blackwood," a voice calls Mr. Hendricks, the butler, his tone apologetic. "I saw your light from the servants' corridor and thought I should verify your safety." Relief washes through you, followed immediately by irritation at your own nervous reaction. You cross to the door and open it, finding Mr. Hendricks in the corridor with his own candle, looking faintly embarrassed about interrupting your rounds. "Mr. Hendricks, I'm quite safe. As you see, simply conducting the usual inspections." You gesture toward the bedroom behind you. "Though I'm glad you're here, there's significant water damage to one of the windows. I'll need your assessment before we determine whether to call the estate carpenter or a specialist." He follows you to the damaged window, examining the rotted sill with professional concern. This is worse than last quarter's inspection. The winter rains are taking their toll. He probes the wood gently, frowning as his finger sinks into the softened timber. "I'll send for the carpenter first thing tomorrow. We may need to shutter this window from the outside to prevent further water ingress until repairs can be completed." You nod agreement, then hesitate before asking the question that's been nagging at you since discovering the journal. Mr. Hendricks, has anyone else been granted access to the East Wing recently? Any of the family, perhaps? Or, not to my knowledge, he interrupts, his tone puzzled. Why do you ask? You show him Margaret Thornfield's journal, explaining where you found it. His expression shifts from puzzlement to concern as he examines the volume. I'll speak with Lord Thornfield about this directly. It's irregular. Certainly. The East Wing should remain undisturbed except for our quarterly inspections. A quirky thought occurs to you as you watch Mr. Hendricks handle the journal with careful respect. Perhaps the book's appearance isn't sinister at all. Perhaps one of the family placed it there deliberately, for reasons they haven't shared with the staff. Lord Thornfield occasionally retrieves items from the East Wing without informing you it's his house, after all, and he's not required to explain his actions to servants. But the secrecy still unsettles you. The deviation from expected patterns. Mr. Hendricks departs with promises to address the window damage and investigate the journal's mysterious appearance. You continue your inspection alone, unlocking the fifth room, a small study that contains nothing but a desk, 3 chairs, and walls lined with empty bookcases. The windows here are secure, the room undisturbed, everything exactly as it should be. The final locked room occupies the far end of the corridor, and approaching it always requires a small act of will. The door is painted black, the only black door in the entire house, and it's fitted with 2 separate locks that must be opened in sequence. You leave the mysterious East Wing behind, locking the main access door and testing it twice to ensure the bolt has fully engaged. The discovery of Margaret Thornfield's journal has left you unsettled, but you force yourself to refocus on the remaining tasks. The night is advancing, your pocket watch shows nearly 10 o'clock, and you still have crucial areas to inspect before you can retire. The coordination with Mr. Hendricks, the head butler, is essential to ensuring complete household security, and tonight that coordination requires more attention than usual. You find Mr. Hendricks in his pantry, a domain as meticulously organised as your own housekeeper's room. The butler's pantry serves as his command centre. Workshop and storage area all in one shelves hold the family's everyday silver that doesn't warrant the main strong room. A sink allows for quick polishing, and a small desk provides space for his correspondence and accounts. He's currently working on the household's wine inventory, his ledger open before him and a pencil tucked behind his ear. Mrs. Blackwood. He greets you, setting down his pencil and rising slightly from his chair, a gesture of respect between equals in the household hierarchy. I trust the East Wing inspection proceeded smoothly after I left you. As smoothly as inspecting abandoned rooms ever proceeds, you reply, settling into the chair he indicates. The final room showed no concerns beyond the usual dust and staleness. But we need to discuss the exterior doors. I want to verify that our coverage is complete. This is the nightly ritual you've developed with Mr. Hendricks over 9 years of working together, the coordination meeting where housekeeper and butler compare notes to ensure no security gaps exist between their respective territories. Broadly speaking, you're responsible for interior spaces and windows while he handles exterior doors and the family's direct service areas, but the boundaries blur in practice, and careful coordination prevents oversight. Mr. Hendricks retrieves his own inspection ledger, opening it to tonight's entries. Main entrance locked and bolted at 9:30. Garden door to the conservatory locked at 9:15 after Lady Thornfield finished her evening reading. Servant's entrance near the boot room locked at 8:45 after the final delivery was received. The tradesman's entrance by the kitchen yard locked at 9 o'clock after cook verified no additional deliveries were expected. You consult your own notes, cross-referencing his list with your window inspections. All windows adjacent to those doors have been checked and secured. I found the conservatory's eastern window latch slightly loose. I've tightened it. But you should be aware in case Lady Thornfield reports a draft. Noted. He makes a mark in his ledger. The stable yard gate. That's your territory, but I checked the boot room door that opens onto it. Secured with a double bolt mechanism, and I've tested it thoroughly. You pause, remembering another detail. The scullery door to the kitchen courtyard is also secure. Though I noticed the bolt is developing rust, we should have it replaced before it becomes difficult to operate. Historians still argue whether the elaborate division of responsibilities in grand households represented efficient specialization or unnecessary bureaucratic complexity. You've experienced both well-organized households and chaotic ones, and you can attest that clear territorial boundaries combined with regular coordination like this meeting prevent the gaps and overlaps that create security vulnerabilities. When everyone knows exactly what they are responsible for, and when senior staff communicate regularly, the household functions as a secure, efficient organism, Mr. Hendricks moves on to more delicate territory, the family's private areas. I locked Lord Thornfield's study at his request. He's finished his correspondence for the evening and has retired to the drawing room. The study will require your final inspection with the wax-sealed key, of course. His tone is carefully neutral, acknowledging the unusual protocol surrounding that particular room. I'll handle it as the final task before retiring. You confirm, the study's special security measures are known to both of you, but neither questions them aloud. Some things are simply accepted as Lord Thornfield's prerogative. You discuss a few minor housekeeping matters, a loose floorboard in the music room that Mr. Hendricks will arrange to have repaired, your concern about the east wing water damage, his observation that the main entrance hall's chandelier requires cleaning. These conversations serve a dual purpose. They address practical household management, while also maintaining the professional relationship that makes your partnership effective. A quirky moment of levity breaks the formal tone when Mr. Hendricks mentions the incident with young Timothy, the boot boy, and a confusion over which boots belonged to which gentleman during yesterday's shooting party. The poor lad paired Lord Thornfield's boots with Mr. Ashworth's gaiters, and Mr. Ashworth's boots with the Honourable Mr. Pemberton's gaiters. It took 20 minutes to sort out, and I thought Lord Thornfield would expire from suppressed laughter. You allow yourself a smile. Timothy is learning, and mistakes are part of that process. At least he's eager and honest. Those qualities will serve him well as he gains experience. Indeed. Which reminds me, I've been meaning to ask your assessment of Mary Sullivan, the new scullery maid. She reports to Mrs. Murray, of course, but you see more of the overall household dynamics. Mr. Hendricks's question reflects the collaborative approach that makes your working relationship successful. Neither of you operates in isolation, and both value the other's observations. Mary shows promise, you reply thoughtfully. She's young and occasionally forgetful. She left a window unlatched in the still room yesterday, but she responds well to correction and doesn't repeat mistakes. I think with proper guidance, she could advance to kitchen maid within a year. Mr. Hendricks makes a note. I'll mention that to Mrs. Murray. We're fortunate to have staff who show genuine potential for advancement rather than simply marking time in their positions. The conversation shifts to the upcoming house party scheduled for next month, a 3-day gathering that will test every aspect of the household's capabilities. 12 guest bedrooms will need preparing, elaborate meals planned and executed, additional temporary staff hired and supervised, you and Mr. Hendricks begin the preliminary coordination, which rooms for which guests, what additional supplies will be needed, how to schedule staff duties to cover the increased workload. The Countess of Ashworth will require her usual accommodations in the blue bedroom. Mr. Hendricks notes, consulting a letter from Lord Thornfield outlining the guest list. and she'll bring her own lady's maid, who will need lodging in the female servant's wing. You make corresponding notes. I'll ensure the blue bedroom receives extra attention during preparation fresh bed curtains, the Countess's preferred lavender sachets, additional candles, and I'll arrange a suitable room for the lady's maid near the other upper servants. The coordination continues for another 20 minutes, covering everything from wine selection to the timing of morning tea delivery. This is the unglamorous reality behind grand house parties that guests never see: hours of careful planning, coordination between departments, anticipation of needs before they're expressed. Finally, Mr. Hendricks closes his ledger with an air of satisfaction. You climb the back stairs to the attic level, your candle casting wavering shadows on the whitewashed walls that narrow as you ascend. The servants' sleeping quarters occupy the top floor of Thornfield Manor, a warren of small bedrooms tucked beneath the sloping roof, where 17 of the household's 23 staff members sleep. The space is divided by gender, with female servants occupying the eastern side and male servants the western, separated by a locked door that you control with yet another key from your ever-present ring. The attic stairs are steeper than those serving the family floors, and the ceiling drops lower with each step until you must duck slightly to avoid the overhead beams. This is a different world from the elegant proportions below, a world of practicality over beauty, function over form. The floorboards are bare pine, worn smooth by generations of servants' footsteps. The walls are plain plaster, unadorned by wallpaper or artwork. A single gas lamp at each end of the corridor provides minimal illumination, creating pools of light separated by stretches of shadow. Your first responsibility is the female servants' wing, and you begin your inspection at the farthest room, the one occupied by the 3 youngest housemaids. You knock softly before opening the door, not wanting to startle anyone who might have retired early. No response comes, so you ease the door open and peer inside. The room is perhaps 12 feet square, containing 3 narrow iron bedsteads arranged along the walls, 3 small wooden chests for personal belongings, and 1 shared washstand with a chipped porcelain basin. The maids are still working, finishing evening turn-down service in the family bedrooms. You imagine so the room stands empty. You check the single window, a dormer set into the sloping ceiling that provides the room's only natural light. The window latch is secure, but you notice condensation on the glass, a sign that the room lacks adequate ventilation. You make a mental note to remind the housemaids about cracking the window open during the day, even in cold weather. Stale air in sleeping quarters breeds illness, and a sick housemaid means redistributing her duties among already overworked staff. You move methodically through the female servants' corridor, the room shared by the 2 kitchen maids, the laundry maid's tiny chamber, the dairy maid's equally small space. Each room receives the same attention: window checked, floor examined for anything amiss, general condition assessed. The rooms are Spartan but generally clean, though you note that someone has left laundry hanging on a makeshift line stretched across one room, a fire hazard that will require addressing tomorrow. The upper housemaids occupy slightly better quarters, single rooms, rather than shared spaces, reflecting their higher status in the household hierarchy. Sarah, the head housemaid, has a room that's almost comfortable, a proper wardrobe instead of just a chest. A small bookshelf holding a modest collection of volumes, even a rag rug beside the bed. You check her window and notice she's left a book on the windowsill, Villette by Charlotte Bronte. You observe, recognizing the distinctive green cloth binding. Historians still argue whether the Victorian servant hierarchy, with its minute gradations of status, reflected in everything from room assignments to meals to forms of address, represented rational organisation or oppressive class consciousness. You've lived within this system your entire adult life, rising from scullery maid to head housekeeper through decades of service, and you understand both perspectives. The hierarchy can feel suffocating when you're at the bottom, but it also provides clear paths for advancement and recognises merit with tangible rewards. The servants' bathroom occupies a small room between the female and male wings, a relatively recent addition installed 15 years ago when indoor plumbing reached the upper floors. A single bathtub serves all the servants, with strict schedules governing its use: female servants on Monday and Thursday evenings, male servants on Tuesday and Friday, upper servants taking precedence over lower. You check that the small window is latched and that someone has properly emptied and cleaned the tub after tonight's use. You unlock the door, separating the female and male wings, a barrier that's never opened except during your inspections and in case of emergency. The male servants' corridor mirrors the female side in layout but feels different somehow. Perhaps it's just your imagination. But the air seems heavier, the silence more pronounced. The footmen occupy the first rooms you encounter: 3 young men who serve at table, answer doors, and perform the various duties that require male strength or public-facing presentation. Their rooms are tidier than you expected: beds made with military precision, clothes hung neatly on pegs, boots lined up beneath the beds like soldiers on parade. The head footman, Charles, has clearly enforced standards among his juniors. The boot boy, young Timothy, sleeps in the smallest room on the floor, barely large enough for the single bed and a chest. You remember Mr. Hendricks's story about Timothy teaching himself to read. And you smile when you see evidence of his studies: a primer resting on the chest. The page is held open by a stone used as a paperweight. The window here is particularly small, hardly larger than a porthole, but it's properly latched. The grooms and stable hands sleep over the stables in separate quarters that fall outside your jurisdiction, but the coachman rates a room in the main house befitting his senior status. His quarters are at the far end of the male corridor, and you find them meticulously maintained. The coachman, Mr. Peterson, is 63 years old and has served the Thornfield family for 42 years longer than anyone currently employed. His room reflects a lifetime of accumulated possessions: photographs of horses he's driven, ribbons won at county shows, a small shelf of books about horsemanship and carriage maintenance. You check his window and notice it's been left slightly open despite the cold November air. You consider closing it. Then remember that Mr. Peterson suffers from respiratory complaints and his doctor recommended fresh air. Even in winter, you leave it as he set it, merely verifying that the opening is too small to permit entry by even the most determined intruder. A quirky discovery awaits you in the hallway outside the coachman's room. Someone has left a mousetrap baited with cheese, positioned near the skirting board. The trap is empty, suggesting the mice are either absent or too clever to be caught by such obvious means. You make a note to ask about the mouse situation. An infestation in the servants' quarters could quickly spread throughout the house. The valets occupy rooms near the head of the stairs, convenient for responding quickly if their employers require nighttime assistance. Lord Thornfield's valet, Mr. Matthews, keeps a room so austere it's almost monastic: a bed, a chair, a small table, nothing more. The contrast with the coachman's personal museum couldn't be sharper, and you wonder what it says about the 2 men's personalities. You descend from the servants' quarters with tired legs and an equally weary mind. But your work isn't finished. One final task remains the most delicate, the most sensitive, the one requiring your utmost discretion and care. You must secure Lord Thornfield's private study with the special wax-sealed key, a responsibility that distinguishes you from every other servant in the household and represents the ultimate expression of trust between master and housekeeper. The study occupies a corner of the ground floor, positioned to catch both morning and afternoon light through tall windows overlooking the rose garden. You approach the door quietly. Though you know Lord Thornfield retired to his bedroom 20 minutes ago, Mr. Hendricks confirmed it during your coordination meeting. Still, old habits of discretion persist, and you find yourself moving with the hushed reverence of someone entering a private sanctuary. You pause outside the study door and retrieve the small black ribbon from inside your bodice, the one that holds the study's unique key separate from all others. The key itself is unremarkable medium-sized brass, standard configuration, but the ritual surrounding it elevates it beyond ordinary function. Each morning after Lord Thornfield leaves the study, you lock it and seal the key with red wax bearing his personal signet. Each evening, you break the seal, unlock the door for your inspection, then relock it and apply a fresh seal that will remain unbroken until morning. The wax seal on today's key is intact. You examine it carefully in the candlelight, verifying that the impression of Lord Thornfield's crest shows no signs of tampering. Satisfied, you break the seal with your thumbnail, catching the fragments in your palm so they won't fall on the carpet. These wax fragments you'll dispose of in your office fireplace. Nothing associated with the study's security can be left lying about. You insert the key and turn it smoothly. This lock receives daily use and is always kept properly maintained. The door swings open, and you step into Lord Thornfield's most private domain. A room you've entered thousands of times, yet never without a small flutter of awareness that you're privileged to be here. The study reveals Lord Thornfield's character more clearly than any other room in the house. Unlike the formal drawing rooms designed to impress visitors, or the grand library meant to display family culture, the study is purely functional, a workspace arranged for efficiency and comfort rather than show. The massive desk dominates the centre of the room, its leather surface covered with neat stacks of correspondence, estate ledgers, agricultural journals, and the various papers that govern a property of Thornfield Manor's size and complexity. Bookcases line 3 walls, containing not rare collector's items but working references, legal texts, farming manuals, stud books recording bloodlines of horses, county histories, books on engineering and architecture. These are books meant to be used rather than admired. Their spines cracked from repeated consultation, margins filled with Lord Thornfield's pencilled notes. You begin your inspection with the window's 3 tall sashes that could provide entry if left unsecured. Each latch receives your careful attention, and you're pleased to find them all properly fastened. Lord Thornfield is meticulous about security in his private space, a characteristic you appreciate even as it makes your own job somewhat redundant in this particular room. The study's fireplace has been properly damped for the night, reduced to glowing embers that will die completely within the hour. You verify that the fireguard is in place, a precaution against sparks that might ignite papers if they scattered in a draught. Fire is every housekeeper's nightmare, and in a room filled with documents, the risk demands extra vigilance. As you conduct your inspection, you can't help but notice certain details that speak to Lord Thornfield's current preoccupations. A surveyor's map spread across one corner of the desk shows the eastern boundary of the estate, with several areas marked in red pencil. A letter from an agricultural implement manufacturer lies beside it, discussing the merits of a new mechanical reaper. Lord Thornfield is planning something: improvements, expansions, modernizations. The estate is never static under his stewardship, always evolving to meet changing times. Historians still argue whether the Victorian landed gentry represented forward-thinking stewards of agricultural progress or backward-looking obstacles to social change. You've served Lord Thornfield long enough to know he falls firmly in the progressive camp, always reading, always considering new methods, always willing to invest in improvements that might benefit the estate and its tenants. He installed the modern drainage system that saved the lower fields from waterlogging. He built the new cottages for farm workers that actually have proper sanitation. He sent his son to agricultural college rather than simply expecting inherited knowledge to suffice. You move to check the study's interior door, the one connecting to the library, and find it properly locked from this side. This door represents a potential security weakness, as it could theoretically provide access to the study if someone broke into the library first. But the lock here is substantial, and you've already verified that the library itself is secured. A quirky detail catches your eye. Lord Thornfield has left his reading glasses on the desk, folded carefully atop a closed book. The glasses are gold-rimmed, elegant but not ostentatious, and their presence suggests he was reading until quite recently. The book beneath them is On Liberty by John Stuart Mill. You recognise the title from the previous glimpses. Lord Thornfield's political philosophy tends toward liberal reform, another characteristic that sets him apart from some of his more conservative neighbours. You complete your circuit of the room, verifying that everything appears undisturbed and secure. The study contains nothing obviously valuable, no silver, no jewellery, no cash, but it holds something far more important information. The estate ledgers alone represent comprehensive knowledge of the family's financial position. The correspondence files contain private communications that could prove embarrassing or worse if made public. The legal documents in the locked cabinet detail property holdings, contracts, settlements. In the wrong hands, the contents of this room could damage the Thornfield family considerably. That's why the wax seal matters. It's not really about keeping you honest. Lord Thornfield trusts you completely, or you wouldn't have this responsibility in the first place. The seal is about creating an unbreakable chain of accountability. If anything ever went missing from the study, the sealed key would prove that you and only you had access. It protects both Lord Thornfield's interests and your own reputation. You exit the study and lock the door behind you, then retrieve the stick of red sealing wax and the small spirit lamp you keep in your pocket for this purpose. The ritual of sealing has become meditative over 14 years. Light the lamp. Warm the wax. Let precisely 3 drops fall onto the key's bow. Press Lord Thornfield's signet into the soft wax. Hold steady while it cools. The resulting seal must be perfect clear impression. No air bubbles. Properly centred. You examine tonight's seal critically and find it acceptable. The Thornfield crest, a stag rampant above 3 oak leaves, stands out clearly in the hardened wax. You blow gently on the seal to ensure it's completely set. Then tuck the ribbon and key back inside your bodice, where they will remain until tomorrow morning's routine. Your inspection is complete. Every door locked, every window secured, every potential vulnerability addressed. Thornfield Manor is as safe as human diligence can make it.